watch us, you know, it's getting better all the time. Mental health outreach, providing information and support while encouraging hope and faith. And those of you who watch us also know that I'm always have issues with my computer sometimes, so bear with us, and we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. But we're going to be talking about mental health. You can find out more about us by logging onto the website at www.igbatt.com. Again, this is It's Getting Better All the Time. Mental health outreach, providing information and support while encouraging hope and faith. I'm going to start by asking Minister Mills to tell us about herself.
Hello, my name is Janine Mills. Oh wow, it's always hard when I have to talk about myself, but I'm an accountant. I'm a minister. I'm with Grace and Truth International Church. I've been with them for about 6 years now, and I've been a minister with them for almost a year, so I'm a newbie in the ministry. Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And I think one of the and I won't say most important things, but you're also living with a mental illness.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
That is true.
And what's your diagnosis?
I am diagnosed as bipolar depressive.
Okay. How did you get to that point where you can say that? Because, sorry, a lot of people are diagnosed, but they don't want to get to that point. What was your journey to that point?
It was a long journey. I would definitely have to say most of my journey I've gone just misdiagnosed for the most part. I can remember being young, and I think I was always just depressed. I was always diagnosed as a chronic depressive, and being treated for that. And I didn't like to let people know, especially when I was younger, that I was having depression issues, mainly because I guess just living in my neighborhood, there was no one else openly like that, and I just felt like, okay, why I have to be the special one, to have to be diagnosed with anything. And so it was hard, and as I grew older into adulthood, the problems that I thought I had were just starting to really get out of control, and my symptoms were just, I didn't even realize I was having symptoms, but my symptoms was just everywhere. I was from being really happy, go lucky, like I could literally felt like I could just jump off of a building and I would be okay, to having major shopping, just like I'm talking out of control shopping. Couldn't tell you why I was buying what I was buying, but I was doing it anyways, very over the top. And then I would have these really bad down days where I would be down for it just depended, a day, 2 days, 3 days. And finally it got to the point where my down day it was too down, and I had to be admitted into the hospital. And I stayed probably a week and a half. I think I had just reached my limit with what was going on. I didn't know what was going on. I just reached my limit. I had my doctor, my general doctor was like, okay, something is wrong. I think you need more attention. And so in the hospital, I got a therapist and a psychiatrist, and they did all these tests on me, and they did all these tests, asking all these questions, and I'm trying my best to answer them, and it comes out that I was bipolar depressive. And it was a eye-opener to me. I was just like, what in the world? I'm what?
And I wanted to just ask you a question. You said something as a child in the neighborhood, and not knowing. I think about a lot of people kids are going to be going back to school soon.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of people who have children, or you may be a child listening to us, and you have things going on with you, and you don't know what it is, right? You don't know why I feel the way I feel, or I think the way I think.
Right.
And what you're saying just kind of underscores the point that when we're talking about severe mental illness, persistent mental illnesses, they do tend to start the symptoms when you're younger.
Yes.
Right. Many times we just don't know what's going on. Right. You were fortunate in that you were able to kind of grow up and go to school and become an accountant. But we want people to know that unfortunately a lot of people who children, when they start having problems, they don't know what to do. Some of them may turn to drugs, right? Some of them may turn to alcohol, drugs and alcohol. They go to school because they're they're deemed a behavioral problem when they're really not. They have bipolar, something is going on with them, and then they don't get the help that they need. And then a lot of these kids grow up to be adults who don't function well in society. They don't function well in society because they had symptoms as a child that went undiagnosed or misdiagnosed, and then they started, like I said, the drugs, alcohol, partying, being out of control, in and out of jail, just a whole lot of other problems and challenges. So I think it's so important that as we move into August and prepare for school, as parents get their kids shots and buy school clothes, that they also talk about a mental health wellness checkup as well. Right. So I just kind of wanted to kind of throw that out. You said that you knew something was going on because you were spending, and until finally got to the point that you had to go into the hospital.
Yes.
Okay. What was that like, going into the hospital for the first time?
It was scary. I will have to say, and it was degrading in a way, and I say that because I believe my nurses were just insensitive to what was going on. And, so I could hear, just because you're diagnosed with anything doesn't mean that you're not intelligent. It doesn't mean that you can't understand what's happening in your surroundings. And my nurses were talking behind my back, but talking in a way where I could hear them. And I'm like, wow, why are they treating me this way? And, I just didn't understand in this day and age how you could treat someone as if, they're slow, or, that they can't comprehend what's happening. And so it was scary because I had to, okay, there is something wrong with me. And it's evident that something wrong because I'm here in the hospital. And then, you've always had the stigmas that start to come out because now I feel like I'm being treated some type of way. And that makes me angry at that point because it's just like, okay, why are you treating me this way? I don't understand, my treatment. And so it was that battle, and it's like I felt like no matter what I said, or anytime they asked a question, the doctors would ask questions of me, I felt like it was like a no-win situation. Because when I was in the room, it was like, oh, you're just being so antisocial, stay out the room. And really, I just wanted to not be involved in any craziness, if that makes any sense, because you're on a floor where there's a vast difference of everything going on, and every type of person, from schizophrenia, like my roommate personally, she was schizophrenic, and so me and her is in a room together, which to me was not a great mashup. And then you have other people experiencing other very severe to very mild case symptoms of whatever is going on with them. So, you have us all on one floor. And, so if I'm staying in my room just so I wouldn't find myself in any type of situations, then, oh, she's just, very withdrawn, and she's not, willing to be in society. I mean, it was just like, but then if I went out in society and I'm saying, trying to, be, part of the group and all these things, then it's like, oh, I think because I have my own opinions, oh, she's like a troublemaker, you know. So it's just like, really, I can't win no matter what I do in this hospital. It's time for me to go because it's a no-win situation.
So you said you were there a week, and then you
About
got
a week.
What was it like, your first therapist, your first doctor?
I think it was okay. I think when, the one-on-one for me was better than trying to have me in this kind of group setting with a lot of people. So meeting my therapist, and her job was just, she really wanted me to understand that I'm still a normal person, because I felt like, wow, it's just I function a little differently, and I have to learn how to kind of function with having the bipolar depression. And my psychiatrist, it was a tug and pull with me and him because I wasn't being honest, and I had a lot of stuff going on, and I would always say I'm okay, and because I wasn't being honest with him, it was, it made it harder for him to do his job, and to really make sure I was on the correct medications. And I mean, I was doing unreasonable things. I remember talking to my therapist, and I was cutting. I even from a child, I had cut a lot, and she said, you just have to be honest. I would hear little voices, and I didn't want nobody to know, because I felt like they would really think I was certifiable and would lock me away for the rest of my life. So I just wasn't being honest with my psychiatrist. And then I remember the first time when I talked with my therapist, and she says, you're going to have to come clean and really, let him know what's going on with you. That way he can really, truly help you. And so I remember having that meeting with him, and, normally those meetings take about 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and then you're out the door, and they just kind of throw you medication. And I remember telling him, I let it all out. I said, I'm still cutting. I do hear voices, and this is going on. And, I just have really good days, and then I'll have a really bad day, and then that bad day turned into a week. And, he was like, Janine, okay, from you being honest, I can really help you now, because I can really adjust some of the medication. You have to make sure you're taking the medication. And that became important because, it did help with some of the things, that I would see that wasn't there. The medication really helped, bring things into perspective that way. The voices started to diminish. I wasn't hearing them like I was, and I could really almost hear myself think. So it was a uphill battle, going back, but I just learned from that being honest with what is really going on with me, in the long run, it helps me. And I think, if you're being honest with what's going on with you and not afraid to tell your psychiatrist what's going on with you, that in the long run, that it will benefit you more.
And you said so many things there. I didn't want to stop you. So many good points. You talked about, first of all, about being honest, because that fear that if you're honest about what's going on, that you said they might lock you up, right? Yes. Or certifiable,
right? Oh,
yes. And I think,
thought that.
Yeah, a lot of people they don't want to say what's going on, but if they come out and say, this is what's happening with me, then they can get the help that they need.
Really, because not saying what's happening to you, like what's really happening to you.
Just like,
I think I'm okay.
Okay.
But not saying what's really happening to you. In my case, it was the fact that he wasn't giving me the correct medications or the correct dosage of the medication. So to me, taking the medicine at first, this isn't working. I'm still hearing all these voices, like whatever. But how does he know what to give me if he doesn't know. I'm sorry. If he doesn't know that I'm hearing the voices. Like, it never came up. I never told him before that I was hearing voices. I never told him before that I would see shadows. I mean, I never told him before, and didn't know that there was things that could help, minimize that and stuff like that. So,
right, because you think about it, especially when you're talking to a psychiatrist or people in the field, I always tell people, it's the first time you're saying it, but it's not the first time that they've heard it before,
Right.
Right. So the thing is, it's just kind of realizing that, you're in a place where you can't feel safe. Now, of course, you always have to be careful because, you have some very excellent psychiatrist therapists, and you have some that's not as skilled. You have some that really work well with people in the African American community, and some who don't really work well, because there is that cultural difference sometimes in how we explain things. And sometimes the way we explain things could be taken to mean one way, just because of that culture piece. I've had colleagues of mine, they kind of go into panic because so-and-so said this, and then as I'm listening, well, no, that's just kind of how we talk. So again, but I think it's really important to be honest and to say, this is kind of what's going on with me. And then even when you, like you talked about finally getting to that point, a lot of people, it takes them a long time to get to that point because they are fearful of what other people will say. So they suffer, and they suffer with the voices, they suffer with the symptoms, and not telling anyone. But it's important to say, hey, I need help, and then when you get it, to be honest. You also said something, like I said, you said you function differently. And it's just learning how to deal with that, being able to function differently. Okay? Speak more to that, because I think that's such a good point that, you are normal, you just function differently.
Right. Yeah. How to speak on that is I just, learned that.
Like, so you got to take the medication.
That I have to take my medication. That's just like part of me to function, so I can be out, so I can work, is to take my medication. That was number one, which I didn't want to take the medication because I felt like I didn't want to be trapped into being so dependent on the medication that I wouldn't know if it was me or the medication, and how to, balance that out. Like, if I didn't take the medication, am I going to find myself on top of a building about to jump? I had that battle. Like, I'm just terrified, to take this medication. I have had friends who was taking the medication, and it's like they went one day without it, and I would get a call that they were in a hospital, and I was like, I don't want that to be my life. I don't know what to do, but so it was a battle that way, and it helps when you take the medication. It really does help, and making sure, and it's getting the right cocktails. So just because they give you first try the medication doesn't mean that particular cocktail will work. So it is a trial and error as you go on. I was lucky that they were able to tweak my medicine in a way that I didn't have to go long periods of trying this, that it really, when I took it, it really worked. And when you're differently, it's just I process information differently than most people. So if I'm at work and I'm really stressed out, I would envision people they were talking about me, and I remember that would make my anxiety so high, and I would be like, oh my goodness. And I remember I would have to kind of go to the bathroom and kind of just clear out what was happening and really understand what's real versus what was in my mind of what was happening.
So you got to that point where you knew your symptoms well enough to know, okay, these are my symptoms, and then when they come up again, to challenge that reality.
Yes, I had to definitely challenge, because it was like, and I remember, and it wasn't easy, don't get me wrong. I remember sometimes I would have to talk it out with somebody else. And, I remember my mom, she'd be like, okay, Janine, what do you mean people were they were laughing at you, or they were talking about you at work? Like, what do you mean? Now, were they really laughing? And, I really had to check myself and go, were they really laughing? where? No, and it was like, so a lot of it was, literally, and I had to really, take the time to factor out what was real and what was made up, in my mind.
Yeah,
and that was one of the things that, and so I got real good at just saying, okay, first calm down, because you can't think when you're all worked up, and then you really can't decipher what's real versus what's not real. And I had to just talk myself through the moment of what was happening. Like, okay, this is what was said. Okay, but this is how I took it. So, and I really got good with, okay, this is real. This is what's happening. This is what was said. Now you can deal with what actually happened. So a lot of that I had to talk myself through, and with therapy, it helped me to learn how to talk that through, to really get to what was real. So that was a symptom of mine, just really, in the day when you're at work, and I learned that certain jobs I just couldn't do. Because the stress really brings out a lot of,
Exactly.
in me. It brought out too much, and it was, so, and being an accountant.
Yeah, I know, we want our money, want our check.
That is not an easy job, especially because I deal with payroll.
Right.
So, oh my goodness, that is a stressful job in itself. That, having to talk to people, and sometimes the more people you talk to, just sometimes the more trippy it can get in my head, and then it's like, I want to help everybody, and, all of these things. But then I have to just really bring it back to, okay, this is reality. This is what happened. This is what I can do. This is what I cannot do.
And I think that's just like anybody, if you had diabetes, or if I had hypertension, right?
Yeah.
You have to learn how to function differently.
You do.
Some people have, what do you call these different allergies.
Yes.
You have to function differently, right?
Yeah.
So you can't eat this. Maybe you can't go a place where there are peanuts.
Yeah.
And also, I think about the grace of God.
Yes.
The grace of God is the ability of God, right?
Yes.
And God has given you that ability, has given people that ability to do those types of things. To kind of, people always want to see, I think, the negative, when you first are diagnosed, well, where's your faith? Where's this? All this type of stuff.
Yes.
They said, no. God is saying that my strength, my strength. Now, you're in such a beautiful position, I think about, because now you have the strength of God to count His ability to do what it is that you need to do so that you can live. And I always say, living with a mental illness doesn't make you doesn't mean you can't live. You just live differently.
And you do. You live
That's
differently.
how you live differently.
Absolutely.
And then the other point that you made in this, so many good points, you talked about the psychiatrist visit. And I just want people to know this, that when you do see a psychiatrist, unless that psychiatrist is a treating psychiatrist, or they just, private practice maybe, but they don't have all day like the therapist, right?
No.
Because they have so few psychiatrists, and with them, it's going to be like a 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the most. So if you have something that you need to say, you need to go ahead and say it, right? And this is not the case with all the psychiatrists, but they're busy, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they don't care. It just means when you come in and say, well, how you doing? That's not time for you to say, oh, I had a great time at the baseball game. Like you're a friend. Your time is clicking. It's ticking, right?
It is.
So you need to say, well, all he did was ask me, or she did was ask me, was I thinking about killing myself, suicidal? Yeah, they have those basic questions. But if you have something, you need to go ahead and ask.
Most definitely.
You need to go ahead and ask.
Yeah, and what I would do is, in my case, so I wouldn't forget anything, is I wrote little points down out on a piece of paper. I had little points, because I would really evaluate what happened to me within a week or 2 weeks when I would see my my psychiatrist. And so I would jot down those points. So when I would go into my appointment, he says, how are you? I'm like, okay, let me just, I would literally, I promise you, I would read down, okay, well, this kind of happened and it just didn't settle well with me. I'm not even sure if that's okay, and we will work through all of my points. So he's addressing my concerns.
Yeah.
And then he looks at, well, let's see what you're on, maybe we need to give you something else, or tweak something, or if I find that, I think one time I just found that I was really depressed, like I couldn't get out the bed. I'm struggling trying to just function as a person, and all I could do was just lay down. And he was like, this isn't right, but if I didn't tell him that, he would have never, he's not in the house with you,
right,
or they're not in the house with you, so they don't know what you're going through, so they really do rely on you telling them, this is what's happening. And it turned out that we had to switch my medication because it stopped working, or I got not that it stopped working, but that because I had been taking it so long that I was kind of immune to it. So he was like, well, we're just going to switch it out. And I was like, okay, let's try that. And it better. The depression was a lot better, to manage.
Okay.
And so, it's definitely, I think, you have time just like they have time. And it's valuable time. And it's just use those 15 minutes to really, or 10 minutes, whatever it is, to really help yourself.
Right. You
know what I'm saying? And if it's just doing a little checklist, do the little checklist. I mean, he looks for, and he'll ask me now, because he knows me. He's like, you don't have your checklist? What's going on? You don't have a checklist for me of, what's been happening that we can go through, So, I mean, it really does work.
Do that.
Yeah, definitely. Get it out.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, just get it out. Don't be, you have to have that trust factor that they're there to help you fix what's going on with you. And if you don't have that trust with them, it's a take and pull, and it can keep you, being symptomatic for a lot longer than you actually need to be.
What is the hardest time, the hardest time or the hardest thing you had to deal with living with a mental illness or within the journey?
The hardest thing I have to live with?
Or had to live with, yeah.
Have to live with? The hardest thing, I'm trying to think. I would say the hardest thing for me is when I find myself in an episode, if you will, and you try to go through your factors of, let me call, you have your group of people that you may call to say, look, this is what's going on with me, or I'm at work and I'm having this total moment that makes no sense to no one, and what do I do? That and trying to manage. And sometimes when you can't talk to your therapist because you've called, but let's just say they're in with another client, or the people on your friend list that you have to call for your support isn't available, is trying to, okay, how can I get through this? How can I get through this moment right here and now? Do I go home? I've always been a kind of leery to tell my job that I have a mental illness. Not because I'm ashamed of my mental illness, it's because I feel like I will then be mistreated at work.
Yeah, and that's always something you got to pay attention to. Yeah.
I don't know how I feel like that, so that makes me feel, or I feel like they will now make up reasons, and blame it on my mental illness when that wasn't even the case at all. So I have that battle, and so I have not felt comfortable coming out at work just for, little reasons like that. Just for little reasons like that. But, just how to manage in those moments. And, and it's really hard. And, I mean, it's exhausting. I don't know about anybody else, but for me, it is really exhausting to the point, I'm talking, my body is drenched in sweat. Trying to, just hold it together long enough to just get out that, and sometimes I do have to call the suicide hotline. Sometimes I have to make that call, be like, look, I'm at my wit's ends right now. I don't know what to do. I'm having a hard time just managing my thought pattern to get to a calm place where I can really think this through. And that's a scary. That's scary because it's not like I know all the time when that's happening. And it doesn't just happen when I'm at home.
Right.
Literally, like I'll be at work and I'm working with people and it'll just come on and I'm like, oh, and I start, like, I don't want to freak out. I don't want to freak nobody else out. Oh, they're going to think I'm crazy for sure, and that becomes very stressful. So,
and I think that's what a lot of people don't kind of really realize when you're talking about managing a long-lasting illness, right?
Yeah.
With things, it's like, again, I just keep going back to the diabetes piece. Like, a person will be fine, and then something will trigger, or something, I was on the plane, and I guess the lady 2 seats over, she forgot, or she didn't bring enough, or whatever she needed to bring, and she was just really, kind of going through. But again, like you said, that episode came from out of nowhere. And when it came, she had to seek help.
Yes.
And I'm kind of making the analogy between the mental illness and the physical illness, even though we know that they're the same, because many times people will minimize mental illnesses. It's real easy to say when somebody is telling you this is what's going on with me, as far as from a mental health standpoint, for us to really say, well, why don't you just don't worry, be happy? Why don't you do this or do that? Or why don't you pray? And why don't you do, read your Bible or fast? And all of these things that we're doing, right? But that doesn't take away from the fact that these bodies do get sick.
Yes.
Right? So when we're talking about having a mental illness, we're talking about a brain illness. The brain gets sick, right?
Yes.
The brain, just like the heart can get sick, just like the your legs, anything, any part of the body. And when it gets sick, the thing is not to blame, or why this happened, or if you would have done this, you wouldn't have had diabetes. If you wouldn't have done this, you wouldn't have had cancer. The things happen to this body. But we thank God for the grace of God, where we can call the suicide hotline, or we can call a friend, or we can, take medications, or whatever the case is. So I really want people who are listening, and I guess I'm speaking to the people who, when you hear this, your automatically response is, well, she should just go pray, or he should have just read the scripture, right?
Yeah.
It's the reason why she's here today is because she is praying. See, it's real easy to speak to someone else's, to tell somebody else what they should be doing, but it's not your challenge, right?
Yes.
I can look at the people, athletes competing, and say, oh man, you should do this, you should do this. And I don't exercise at all, right? Right?
Yeah.
So it's real easy to do that. And I think the thing is, we thank God for the grace of God, which is the favor of God. But there are many people who are listening to me, especially when it comes to mental illness. You really have to get the grace of God, right?
Amen.
Before you even speak. Because some of you speak, you don't really know what you're saying. You really don't know what you're talking about. Because you've never lived it.
Right.
Number one.
Yeah.
And even if you never lived it, you can ask God for the sensitivity of it. And some of us don't even do that.
Yeah.
So when we you're talking about coming out. What was it like coming out to people in the church? I know your pastor is very supportive.
Yeah, he is. He's very supportive.
But what are some other things have you heard?
When I came out to my pastor first, because I was kind of I was going through at the time, and I was having mixed emotions. At that time, I was having so many mixed emotions about my medication. And, I would hear people in the church, they would literally have prayers that, I pray these people can stop taking their medication, and it would make me feel bad, because I'm like, okay, am I not supposed to take this medication? Or, am I not supposed to? I had to have a real conversation with my pastor, because I was just going through a whole bunch of different little things, with that. And so he was very supportive, and, he was like, Janine, it's nothing. It's like if you have a cough, people take cough syrup, and no one says anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you have to take your medication to help you feel better, does it help you feel better? Then take the medication, And so, so he was very supportive, and, he really got it. And he was like, I really do want you to talk about it in the congregation, because they probably, which was true, and I had a small congregation. We have a small small members, a small congregation. And so the first time I did a sermon, I talked about mental illness. And I asked people, who here suffers with a mental illness? And no one raised their hand. But they were very shocked when I raised my own hand. And it was like, what? Wait a minute, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And
you have that view of what having a mental illness is like.
Okay. And I think, people was like, wow, I had no idea that you even struggled like that. And I was like, yeah. But, and that's the thing, because it doesn't look like a certain, like you said, just because it doesn't look a certain way, like back in the day, I remember when HIV came out, people thought that it looked a certain way. Oh, leave them alone. They look like they may have HIV. I remember those, because it was running rampant and nobody really understood what was happening. So people just thought you had to look a certain way. And if you looked that way, then that's what you had. And it turned out, no, that was not the case at all. It didn't matter what you looked like. People were still contracting the disease. And, again, with mental illness, just because I don't look a certain way and I don't always act a certain way doesn't mean that I'm not suffering with a mental illness, And so in the church, they became very supportive, very, very supportive. I think it made them really open their eyes. And I would have, some of the members come to me later on about, like, I have a niece,
right.
And this is kind of what's happening, and I just people will start to come ask you questions. What do you I was like, mental illness affects young, it affects old, it affects black, it affects white. It's not a like you can't pigeonhole it that way.
Right.
To like, well, she's 10, she shouldn't have these problems, and that's not true. That is not necessarily true at all, and it just depends. So they became very supportive, and they would ask a lot of questions, and I think it really opened them to see differently and to be more observant, at work or at home, what's going on. And I believe it really helped to save lives. And I say that because I had, one of my members, something was going on with her daughter. And the daughter wasn't talking. And I remember I was talking with the daughter. She felt like when she felt she can open up to me. And, she was like, but I don't want my mom to know. And I was like, no, baby. That, and I had to talk with her and get her to understand, we need to tell your mommy because you need help. And it's a help that I can't necessarily give you, and your mommy necessarily can't give it to you. That doesn't mean she's a bad mommy or you're a bad person. It has nothing to do with that. We want to get you the best help possible for your, because I don't want you to get worse. And she was having a lot of, issues, and so we talked with her mom. And she was like, really? And she just like, all of this is going on in my house, and I didn't even know.
Right, just
and
wasn't aware of it. Yeah.
I was like, no. I mean, don't think you're a bad parent. That has nothing to do with it. What's happening now is we need to get her the best care that she can have. And so now that you are aware of what's going on, it kept the young lady from suicide. She was thinking about suicide because she just didn't know how to deal with her problems.
Yeah.
And they got her a really good therapist and a psychiatrist, and she's managing probably better than I am.
And I think that's so true. I always like to point out that when we talk about mental illnesses, people in the church are made up of the people in society.
Yes.
Right? And a society as a whole is still, we've gotten better, but we're still learning to accept mental illnesses.
Yes.
We're still learning to accept. We're getting better at being able to make the difference between what is mental illness. We're getting better, I think, at making the exception between what's mental illness and, let's just say, what may be more of an emotional, or what may be more, even talking about the demonic realm, okay? That's not what we're talking about here.
Right.
We're talking about brain illnesses. We're talking about severe and persistent mental illnesses. But do understand that in some cases that may be the case. It may be demonic, but that's not what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about brain illnesses, and I think we are getting better at that, and people as a society are getting better at accepting the illnesses. Mm-hmm. Now, let's just say, what would you say, let's say, to a pastor or to a minister who they know there's something going on with them, right? Mm-hmm. But they don't know what to do, or they're afraid about coming out or going to see somebody, or they're afraid of telling their congregation. What would you say to that person?
I would say to that minister or that pastor that maybe find themselves in that situation is what we have to understand is we are human in every capacity that we know. We're human. The body, the mind, everything goes through something. And if this is what's affecting you, we have to find the courage within ourselves to be able to speak out. And what happens when you speak out, because you're in that leadership role, it helps other people to say, wow, wait a minute, okay, I didn't really know about mental illness, but maybe I should really look it up or, research it to see what they're going through. Just because you have a mental illness doesn't mean you don't have faith. You know what I mean? I pray all the time. And, it doesn't mean I don't believe. I believe. And
which is why you pray.
That's why I pray. And I say to those who are in that position, I find now more pastors are coming out, and I forget his name, but he's a pastor. He makes me laugh when I do visit the church, because he's very open with the congregation. I mean, he'd be like, so, he's very open. He talks about, his visits, and I'm just, he's like, this is what I go through. I think he has depression, and I'm not sure what else, but he's very open with his congregation, and it makes the congregation very open to say, this is my struggle. I think we all struggle with something,
right,
whether we want to admit it or not. But I think the more we talk about it and are open to share what we, what we go through, it helps. It's always not about helping yourself at that point, but helping someone else. Mm-hmm. And so another person would be like, well, you had the courage to come out, so that gave me the courage to go seek help.
Right.
And and that's a real thing. And to me, coming out is literally about helping someone else.
Yeah. Because
I will want to see that person or people or groups, whatever, seek the help that they need and stop living the way that they're living,
right, in
that darkness, because that one makes your symptoms worse. Mm-hmm. When you just always trying to hide something and mm-hmm. always that can make you worse. Mm-hmm. So I just say it's okay. It's okay. Mental illness is not a sin.
No, it's not.
And I think that's what people need to understand first. In the church, mental illness is not a sin. Some people have it, some people don't. Mm-hmm. And it's okay if you do. We just need to know how to work with that.
And and I always say like this: if you of the belief that is, let's just say I'm dealing with this because of unforgiveness. Mm-hmm. Well, if that person no longer has that issue and they still have their mental illness, then it was more than spiritual.
Yeah,
I always say, okay, if you think I really believe this is demonic, well then if you pray in the name of Jesus and nothing moves, then you're dealing with something more than that's not just demonic. Right. So I think there's a way to kind of figure out what area that you're in, mm-hmm. But I think it's just easy for people just to talk wolf tickets or mm-hmm. whatever they say. Right. My thing is, if it's a demonic and you feel that way, then cast it out. Right? Or then once you finish, if it's still there, then we know we're dealing with something else. It's kind of really simple. Mm-hmm. Now, this whole situation, mm-hmm. you started your own ministry.
Yes.
Okay. And what is that called?
It's called Symphony Reads.
Okay, and the website?
It's www.symphonyreads.com. I started that probably... It's been so long, about 6 years ago now. And it's a motivational encouragement site. So what it is, and the reason why I created it, well, the first reason why I created it had nothing to do with, helping to encourage other people, was to sell books, because I wrote books, and I've always dedicated my books to those with mental illness, because I, suffer myself. And then, it got to the point where on my blog, people were writing in, saying, well, I just feel so alone. I hear that a lot. I feel so alone, like just nobody understands me. And that was a place in my life that I've been. I just felt alone. I felt like no one understood me. I didn't feel like there was any place for me. I just felt very isolated and very alone. And that is the trick of the enemy. I can just let you know that right now. He wants you to feel alone. He wants you to feel isolated. He wants you to feel like, because you lack faith and all of these other things. If he can keep you from God, that's what he's going to do. He's going to use every trick in the book. And this is no different. And so, I just felt very alone. And I said, well, what can I convey to other people that I want them to understand if they understand nothing else? And that was, you are not alone. There's a community of people out there who understands you for whatever you're going through. So you're not alone. You're not alone because God is with you. He has your back. And he's going to make sure you get to that community of people who just truly understand you and what you're going through. And, once you're there, you may start out just like, but then you might open up. And that helps other people. And then it just becomes this big thing. So I just wanted people to know that they're not alone. No matter where you're going through, you're not alone. There is someone out there that understands you. God understands you. God loves you. And that's the drive of the ministry, is to let people know, yes, this is a real thing. We function. We may function a little differently, but it's a real thing. And you can still live a life, a beautiful life. And just to know that you're not alone. And I hope it reaches places where, it's not a big, ministry, so it doesn't reach out to the place, but it reaches out into those local communities that, maybe don't see the big ministry or doesn't even know that it exists. And just be like, you're not alone. I have so many people that, that will write in, or, when they see me, they'll talk to me. And they still feel like they're just by themselves. And you're not alone. There's someone who understands you. And, that was the main drive of Symphony Reads, is to let people know that they're not alone, that you got this, that there is help out there for you, and to just be that connection to references, to other places that can help. If you just want to vent, you can vent there. If you need prayer, we have a beautiful prayer team that will pray with you. That's the main thing. A lot of people write in with the prayers, and about their situations, about their mental illness, and we pray over them. They want to know more about how I am, and how am I dealing, and I'm like, I'm old now, but I'm still dealing, and I'm still making it through. I have kids, and they love the site, because again, people look at that, and I look at my kids all the time. I pay attention to what they're saying, what's happening with them. And, it turned out my oldest daughter, she needed some therapy, and, to kind of get through her issues. And it's beautiful. And she was like, well, are people going to look at me differently because I have a therapist? I'm like, they shouldn't. And even if they do, you have closed-minded people. You do have some closed-minded people, and there's almost something you can't do about that. But no, don't let those people deter you from getting the help that you need. And that's what the site is about, really just connecting people together that can help other people.
Okay, and that is Symphony Reads, SYMPHONY Reads.com, and we do have a link on our website at igbatt.com. Is there anything in closing in the last few minutes?
Just know that you're loved, and I think that that's a big thing. We think that just because we have a mental illness that there's no possible way that people can love you. I'm going to tell you now, God loves you first, above any and all things. God loves you. And there is a community of people out there that loves you genuinely. They don't need to know who your name is and what you're going through, but they do love you, and they're praying for you. You are being prayed over every day. Never forget that. Never forget that. I know in Symphony Reads, we pray over these situations every day. Every day we pray, because we want people to get the help that they need, and we want people to be okay with the fact that they may suffer with a mental illness, and that there's help out there for you. So never feel like you're not loved, and never feel like you're alone, because you're not.
Okay, God bless you. That has been Minister Mills, the founder of Symphony Reads. This is It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach, igbatt.com. God bless you and good night.